Hello, thanks for tuning in to our presentation. My name is Ashley Morris. I currently work for the Office of Emergency Management for Fairfax County. I'm actually a community engagement specialist, and so it is my job to engage the community, put on disaster preparedness talks, outreach, education, also work on community messaging, establish community partnerships, and really work towards a more prepared and resilient Fairfax County. I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. This is actually the first video of a series that we are doing titled Prep Talks. And so this is all part of the 2020 National Preparedness Month preparedness materials that we're going to be putting out there for Fairfax County residents, but also employees. I want to go ahead and jump into the title of this presentation, which is going to be Disasters Within Disasters, Severe Weather Safety During a Pandemic. So National Preparedness Month is every September, and it's a goal for emergency managers all over the country to take this month to really emphasize how important it is for our community, our workers, and our residents to think about emergencies and disasters and take the time to plan for them, prepare for them, receive information about them, and then actually take action during them to stay safe and make sure that they have everything in order. Because when disasters hit, it's very, widespread. It takes a lot of actions and a lot of resources and a lot of different things. And so our goal every month, really, during the year is to teach preparedness, but especially during September. September 2020 is very different because we're actually living through the middle of a very long disaster. And so the theme of week one is actually disasters within a disaster, to touch on that. Typically, if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, we would do some severe weather safety and some severe weather planning. But because that we're actually going to be covering how to prepare for other emergencies and disasters while you're already going through one. And jumping right into the Prep Talk schedule. So like I said, this is video one of a 5-video series that we're going to be putting out. I am hosting Disasters Within a Disaster, which actually took place the 2nd at 11:30 on a Wednesday. All of our talks will be every Wednesday at 11:30 on the same platform. And so this next following week is going to be September 9th at 11:30, and the title is Always Consider Security a Priority. We're going to be bringing Rob Erb to talk a little bit about security. The following week after that's going to be on disaster mental health and how to stay sharp after a very lengthy pandemic disaster. The following week is going to be work away from work, how to keep your new workspace safe. And so we're going to actually have Wally come in and do some discussion. He's actually from loss prevention. And then also the final week is actually one of the most interesting talks that we have on the docket, and it's actually going to be kind of more of a discussion, open dialogue. Title is What Keeps You Up at Night? And it's going to be with our Director of the Office of Emergency Management, Seamus Mooney. So we're going to go through some different topics, different concerns, what are some concerns about disasters and things that he might have, and how do we work as an agency within Fairfax County to be prepared to respond to them and to recover from them. So a short overview of what this presentation is going to entail. First, I want to kind of highlight what emergency management is, since usually when I go and I get a haircut or I go to the dentist's office, they always ask what I do, and I say I'm an emergency manager, and they kind of look at me and tilt their head and say, well, what's that? Part of our goal of kind of inspiring preparedness is to also educate on what emergency management is. A lot of people don't know. For one, because we're kind of the men and women behind the curtain. We manage the incident and the disasters within the walls of an emergency operations center or behind the scenes. We're not out there, boots on the ground very often, and so people don't always see us. Also, our field, even though it's been around for a few decades, it's still somewhat new, and especially in its sense that it is today, our field really changed and started to shape after 9/11. So we're going to be touching on emergency management. I want to touch on where you can find official weather forecasting information so you're up to date. We're going to touch on what weather hazards are the greatest risk for Fairfax County. We're then going to go into severe weather safety and preparedness. So what you need to do before, during, and after that weather-related disaster occurs. And then we're going to dive into some general emergency planning on communication, insurance, post-storm needs, things of that sort. So if you're ready, I am. We're going to dive in. So starting with, what is emergency management? When people typically ask that, or they say, well, what is that? When I say I'm an emergency manager, I tell people I prepare, respond, and recover from disasters for the community that I work for. And so what does preparedness look like for an emergency manager? It's sitting down with our partners and our other county officials and agencies and partners, and we're creating emergency plans on different kind of disasters that we could have in Fairfax County. We're training together, we're doing outreach, we're putting on exercises to really strengthen our skills so we know what to do during that disaster for the city or county that we're working for. We're maintaining our emergency operations center and all of the tools that we might need if we had a disaster. We're also building relationships, because a big part of all of this is having partnerships, working together, having resources, all of that. So it's very important that we work together to do that. After the boom, which would be the response, the disaster occurs, we spring into action. We're going to help manage the effective response. We're going to make sure that we have the correct amount of people out in the field, make sure that they have the things that they need, including food, lodging, campsites, whatever it might be, depending on what they need. We're going to manage those resources as well and track them, deliver them to them. We're going to activate our emergency operations center and do a lot of our agency coordination from within then. We're going to be sending out emergency alerts with Fairfax Alerts or WIA, which is wireless emergency alerts, or different alert systems. We're also going to document things. And then recovery, that's the rebuild process. So our goal would be to rebuild Fairfax County stronger than the disaster occurred. So that could be damage assessment, could be a little bit of debris management, looking at long-term care, but also managing that recovery process. What is our role to the county during the disaster? And so primarily it's going to be the safety of the people we serve, our residents, followed by making sure that our county employees and assets are okay. And then lastly, which is probably most importantly, especially with lessons learned with COVID, is continuity of services. And so starting to dive into the safety of residents, we take a really big role in providing community information, like I said, especially emergency information. So that might be evacuation orders, notices, sheltering location information, anything that might be of that sort. We're going to tell people what actions they need to take, how to stay safe, where to go to get help, things like that. We might provide those resources they might need. So a roof over their head might be shelter. Providing food, at the shelter, providing water, providing different things that they might need to slowly take care of themselves and recover. And then we also might close areas if it's not safe. Taking care of our county employees and assets, we're going to work with our different agencies and departments to make sure they have what they need to operate and also be well. We're going to take stock in our county property and our county buildings, and also our infrastructure. And then lastly, we're going to make sure that we can provide the same government resources and the same government service that we did before the disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster. So we've learned a lot with COVID how to do that. It's been almost an 8 to 9 month disaster, and we have handled delivering services during that. So that is known as continuity or COOP. So that's another role that we play. So let's dive right into the weather and the weather preparedness. The first step in being prepared for severe weather or weather-related disasters is knowing where to get your weather forecast. There is a lot of different information online that you can research, find different weather forecasts. However, I want to point out that not every forecast that you find on an app or on your phone or online is equal. Some are better than others. The best source is actually going to be your NOAA National Weather Service forecast. So if you go to weather.gov or you just type in NWS Baltimore, Washington, because that's the office that serves our county, you're going to find local forecasts, watches and warnings, and impacts. And believe it or not, they are actually the lead agency and the only weather center that is allowed to issue watches and warnings for us. So when you have that watch or warning, it comes from their office. The local news meteorologists just pass on that information, which is really important because we need to have, conduits of information to deliver it to. But really, the NWS is the weather authority. And so it's really important when you're checking weather forecasts and risks to go to them. Now, there are other, sites like the Weather Channel and AccuWeather, and those are really great. Great professionals, great meteorologists, and everything like that. Just understand that those are actually national. And so sometimes if you look up a forecast of the Weather Channel or AccuWeather, it might be a little more broad because they have to forecast for the entire country. While NWS Baltimore, Washington only has, a handful of counties to really focus on. So what weather risks do we have in the county? Really, our big concerns as emergency managers are going to be flooding, could be flash flooding, river flooding, coastal flooding, tropical weather, so tropical storms, hurricanes, that's going to bring flooding and wind threats, severe thunderstorm threats, which is going to bring damaging winds and hail. Also derechos, if you're familiar with that term, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Tornadoes, heat waves, and winter storms. And that isn't just a list that I kind of just compiled as a what if. All of those things have already happened in the county, and so it's really important to understand that severe weather does happen here, and you really do need to take the time to be prepared for it because it's not a matter of if, it's when. In 2012, we had a derecho, which is basically a very widespread severe thunderstorm complex that came through. It had very severe damaging winds associated with it. It took out a lot of power. A lot of power outages occurred, and it was prolonged. So, it was days to a week without power. There were fatalities. Trees did fall on houses. And unfortunately, too, the after effects of the derecho was the fact that they had a heat wave come in after the storm. People didn't have power. They overheated, and we had heat fatalities associated with that. But really, it was primarily caused by the derecho, right? So those are all things that we can prepare for now. And then flooding, we've already had flooding in 2020. We had it in 2019 and 2018. It's almost been a yearly occurrence of urban flash flooding, and it's really, really important. FEMA is actually on a mission to do more urban flash flood awareness and preparedness in our area. And so I think everybody just needs to know that that is a very real threat. And that is why it is the first topic of the night. And so for flooding and flash flooding, you want to take action immediately. If you are caught in a flash flood and you receive a flash flood alert, first of all, you need to know if you are in lower ground or if you're around low-lying areas. So that could be a stream bed, a creek bed, if you're by water, if you're in a floodplain, all of those things, you need to get to higher ground immediately. Do not look for water. Do not wait. Flash flooding can occur very quickly. If an evacuation order is issued, you want to take action immediately. Once again, do not take your time to wait for the flood to come for verification. You just want to go ahead and act. If an order is issued, it means that the authorities are concerned for your safety. They want you to take action immediately. Remember that water and electricity does not mix, and so if your home begins to flood and it floods high enough to reach, electrical outlets and things like that, do not enter that water. There's an electrical shock risk associated. And then also when you're driving during rain or flash flooding, you always want to turn around, don't drown if you see a flooded road like in that picture. Please do not try to drive through that. You don't know if the road is still there. You don't know if your car will make it across without floating. You might have to be rescued. And I will tell you that most flood deaths are associated with vehicles. So please turn around, don't drown, find another route, take your time. It's better to be late than not to show up at all. How can you prepare for flash flooding? And this is where we're going to kind of get into COVID and other things. If you take a look at the slides, any of the bold tan words are actually going to be potential plans that you might have made previously that could change due to COVID, and you should really assess that plan and make sure that COVID hasn't changed that for you personally. But getting into preparedness, number one is to have 3 ways to get the warning. Having 3 ways is important because if one alert system fails, you still have 2 other chances to receive the message. So for instance, maybe I have a cell phone as one way, a NOAA weather radio as another way, and then a TV source or another source, an app, something. You just want to have at least 3, so that way, even if 2 fail, you still get the message. You want to know your flood risk. You want to check out floodplain maps, like the county has really great maps to show flood risk. You want to think about, if you're evacuated from your home, where you're going to go. Are you going to save up money and go get a hotel for the duration of the evacuation? Do you need to stay with somebody? That is where COVID could very well change. If you're a high risk of COVID, high risk of COVID fatality or bad effects from COVID, you might need to do a reassessment. Maybe for you, you do need to stay isolated. In that case, you do not want to stay in your home and drown to death. But you do want to, make a plan maybe to save up and get a hotel room, or maybe you have a really close friend that you really trust who has been quarantining or staying in their home, and you feel like they're not going to expose you. All of those things need to be worked through, and you need to do your own personal risk assessment, and then choose 3 different locations to evacuate to. I always tell people to have one in the county, in the state, and then out of state. You never really know based on the disaster and what's going on, what one you're going to need. And make sure to have different plans. Some locations you might pick might be isolated, some might be with family. Know what roads flood. If you're going to actually be driving out to evacuate, it's good to know what roads on your commute typically flood so you can avoid them. You can prepare your home by cleaning out your drains and gutters. You also want to make sure that you have flood insurance if you're high risk. Keep in mind that homeowners insurance does not cover flood damage. It will not cover a cent. And so you need to have this discussion with your homeowner's insurance, and also you need to assess your risk and potentially purchase a new flood insurance policy. Keep in mind that it takes 30 days for the flood insurance to go into effect. So this is not something that you can wait one day before the flood and buy and be safe. It's better to take action when you can. And then also paperwork, you want to make sure to have your supplies ready so you can get out fast. That's going to be copies of important documents. It's going to be emergency supplies. This is actually bold because you actually need to make sure that you have COVID material, so mask, hand sanitizers and things like that. For recovery, you want to make sure to avoid floodwaters. They can be very toxic, have very gross things in there that can really make you sick. You want to wait to re-enter an evacuated area until it's safe to do so by first response officials. You never want to drive around a barricade even after the storm. If a road's closed, the road could be damaged. You want to let your family know you're safe. This could change because perhaps previously you could have went and stopped by your family or, done something in person with your family to let them know you're safe. You might not be able to do that with COVID. Now, maybe you need to post on social media, send them a Facebook message, send them a text message. Avoid calling though, because typically when everybody tries to call, it overloads the phone lines. And then start your recovery process. Keep in mind that the government cannot come in and muck your home or help you clean up private property. We can only clean up public. However, we work with volunteer agencies like Team Rubicon and different things and organizations like that. Volunteers can go and help you with that kind of thing. So kind of have a plan and have that as an expectation. Severe thunderstorms. So when we have big thunderstorms around here, the primary risk is going to be damaging winds and hail with an isolated tornado, which we're going to touch on tornadoes next. If you are in the middle of a severe thunderstorm warning and you get the alert, you want to go inside a sturdy building. You do not want to be inside a shed, and you do not want to be under an awning. You need to be inside a sturdy building on the lowest level floor in the most interior room possible with no windows. The goal is to put as many walls in between you and the storm as possible, because as we saw in Iowa with the derecho and also in 2012 with the derecho, winds can be over 100 miles an hour in a derecho. It can actually tear or, actually cause brick walls to fall and blow things down. It can be just as damaged against a tornado. So you want to shelter like a tornado. You want to bring pets inside, and then also if you're caught outside and your only 2 options is a car or outside, you want to choose the car. Being outside is the most dangerous with the debris that's flying around. To prepare for these storms, you're going to have 3 ways to get that warning. You need to choose a shelter location. This is important because, like I said, you want to be in a sturdy building. If you live on a third-story apartment floor like I do, I can't shelter from this in my third story. I need to be on the first floor, right? And maybe my plan was to go to the first floor where I had a friend and I could stay with her. But now, maybe, based on my risk assessment, I'm too vulnerable to COVID to do that. So if that's the case, maybe I want to run to the apartment lobby instead. Maybe there's a bathroom in there that's safer that I can still isolate and be safe. So please reassess those shelter locations, choose 3, and practice it because you need to be able to get there in time. Also, to prepare, you want to trim your trees and branches, bring objects inside to lower the chance of projectiles. Then also you want to help your neighbor out. Check on your neighbor. Let them know, hey, did you see that weather forecast? We're going to have some pretty bad weather today. You can do that half the time when you're, outside doing yard work or walking in the neighborhood. Just mention it. A lot of people, they don't always tune into the news and things like that. And so it's really nice to be able to see that. But keep in mind, helping neighbor, that's going to change with COVID. You might not be able to be outside, or maybe you can socially distance and talk to your neighbor. Or maybe to check on the neighbor, if you had a vulnerable neighbor, maybe you could message them, text them. Maybe you could video chat them instead to check on them and let them know. Give them a call. And then after recovery, once again, you're going to let loved ones know that you're safe. You're going to assess your damages. You're going to report them. Start insurance claims, and then you're also going to avoid down wires. All of these are impacted by COVID because you have to understand that social distancing is going to affect response, but also recovery. So to assess damages, perhaps your insurance company sends out an agent, but maybe they're really backlogged, and maybe they used to send out 3 agents to go faster, but they can only send out 1. That's going to delay all of the claims. It's the same thing with power restoration. They actually said before Messiahs came through the area that power recovery was going to take longer. Some areas up in the Northeast lost power for over a week. It was not repaired, and they said there was going to be impacts with COVID. So keep in mind, COVID changes all of that. To help neighbors, maybe to volunteer. Maybe, some volunteers might not be able to go out. They might be super high risk of COVID. So you might have less help that you would have had. Keep in mind too, for official information, we usually open up family assistance centers and shelters and things like that. All of that is going to change. We're not going to open those up in gyms anymore. Shelters might be hotel rooms where everybody is separated. Debris pickup, that might be different. All of these things are just things to keep in mind as you're making your plan. Tornadoes, very similar to severe thunderstorms. When you have a tornado warning, you're going to take shelter immediately. No windows, lowest level, interior room. If you're in a mobile home or a car, you want to get out and get in a sturdy building. If you cannot do that, stay in the car. Never be outside though. Outside is the most deadly. To prepare for tornadoes, have 3 ways. You need to identify that same shelter location and practice your tornado drills. Help neighbors, tell neighbors, get neighbors involved in preparedness, and then have your go bag and your emergency supplies ready to go. Have that mask. It's probably good to keep spare masks, in your car, in your go kit, at work, in your house. Just have them all over in case you need them. Recover. Make sure to check yourself. Seek medical attention. Something we've noticed with the pandemic is that people need medical attention, but they're too scared of COVID to seek it. If you're really hurt, you are probably more at risk of the injury than COVID. And so you need to keep that in mind and get the help that you need when you need it. Be careful in the debris. That's going to be the same for transferring. You still want to wear your mask when you're around people after. Assess damage and report it. Same thing. Helping neighbors, and then staying tuned for info on recovery. All of these things will be impacted by COVID. Plan for it. And then we're going to jump into general preparedness. And so this is one of my favorite GIFs that I'd love to show. When it comes to bacon, be prepared, because who would not want to be prepared with bacon? I mean, I keep bacon in my back pocket. What can I say? So communications, it's really important out of everything if you're going to plan for communications and to have those contacts. And it's really easy for us to kind of list off the important ones, like perhaps your partner or, somebody like a close friend, whoever your local number one is that you need to get a hold of, maybe your parents, maybe your kids, things like that. Family is very easy for people to kind of identify. But what about work contacts? Do you have different people at work you need to have spare numbers for? What about school? Your school? Do you go to college? Those might be numbers you need. Does your kid go to college? Those might be numbers you need. Does that college have an alert system? That might be something you want to make sure to keep track of in case something happens at the school. Do your kids have elementary school teachers or contacts? Family needs, and then emergency needs. All of those things need to be assessed, and you need to collect those contacts and keep a digital copy and a paper copy. The really great thing I figured out about this is that you can actually go onto Google Contacts, update your contacts. You can actually export those and access them online, and then you can print them out. So not only can you make groups and stuff and keep it digitally in your phone, but you can have a paper copy and store it somewhere safe. Remember that if you need to get a hold of people during a disaster, you're going to text and not call. Keep in mind that you need to have some out-of-state contacts too, in case something really crazy goes on in the state. And then also have your emergency contacts and non-emergency lines. So like the police non-emergency line, or maybe the power company reporting number, the outage. Having all of that in your phone ahead of time really makes things easier, because when you spot a problem, you can just pull it up in your phone and give it a call. Talking about insurance, this is really, really important. Like we said, with flood insurance, you want to make sure to do an insurance checkup annually at least. Review it with your agent. Make sure that your home is covered, your car is covered, that you understand exactly what is being covered, okay? You're going to create an annual inventory of items and costs, so make sure that those things are recorded. So if you did lose everything, you can say, hey, I know for a fact these are the things I had. You're going to consider flood insurance, because homeowners does not cover that. And you need to kind of do an assessment and figure out if that's something that you need to buy. And then also you need to keep copies of all of these policy numbers and phone numbers with your kit, so that way if you get evacuated or you receive bad news about property damage, you can start that claim process immediately. Get your own personal recovery rolling. And then touching on evacuation and sheltering, like we've been saying the whole time, you really do have to do your own personal risk assessment. What hazard is more dangerous to you? If you're going to have, 7 inches of rain, and 7 inches of rain is going to come in your home and potentially fill up your home and cause you to have to be rescued, the flood is probably more dangerous than the COVID is. The same goes for other things, wildfires, other risks. You need to do a risk assessment and figure out, all right, what is more dangerous to me and how can I plan for that while also reducing the impact or the risk of COVID. So you want to make sure that you're bringing the hand sanitizer, the wipes, maybe a spare thermometer to check yourself, a mask, other disaster go bag items too. You're going to also use this thought process to create 2 sheltering options, or even 3. I've been saying 3. But, have a hotel plan, evacuation hotel. Here's some money for that. Have a place to stay with family if the hotel doesn't work, and then have a friend. And then most importantly, it's so important for you to practice your plan. It's great to sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then when you go to do it, it doesn't work out. We want to make sure that your plans are actually going to be feasible. And so it's really good, at least every now and then, to kind of walk through that and maybe even test it. And then to wrap things up, so we do a ton of disaster preparedness information. We also do weather alerts, weather watches, warnings. If we were to have a disaster, we would pass on information with our social media platform. And so you can find us on Facebook and Twitter with Ready Fairfax, and follow us for weather updates, severe weather, preparedness information. We've posted COVID response stuff. And then too, like I said, if we had a future disaster, we would be posting information for people to find there. So please go to those pages, follow, Please share our content with your friends and family, and also try to get them to also like and follow. The more the better. And with that, I just want to let all of you know I'm so thankful for you to take the time to watch this presentation. I hope that you got something really helpful and useful out of that. And I want to remind everybody that preparedness very much is a journey. It's not a start or a stop. There's no final, final place where you go to end preparedness. It's something you're continuously doing with time. And so don't feel so pressured about taking that journey. Just take it step by step, and I will see you along the way. If you have any requests for any kind of emergency management preparedness talks, sessions, outreach materials, anything of the sort, please feel free to reach me. I have my email on the screen, also my phone number. I'm also very active on social media, and so you can find me there as well. Thank you so much for your time, and happy preparedness.